The silence over New Avalon. New Avalon wasn't just another colony. It was the colony humanity's proudest endeavor, its golden foothold on the edge of the Sagittarius Reach. Where once there was only vacuum and silence, now stood a thriving metropolis under a shield of glass and steel. Arcologies towered like silver mountains. Terraced gardens bloomed with earth flora engineered to thrive in alien soil. There were universities, opera houses, orbital elevators, and even a microgravity ballet troupe. It was the crown jewel of Terran civilization, a symbol that humanity had not only survived the dark centuries of war and division, but had transcended them. They called it the Second Eden. And then in less than 10 seconds, it was gone. The distress signal came at 0200 Earth Standard Time, just a single burst, garbled, distorted, choked with static and terror. They're already here. Then silence. No follow-up, no panic beacon, no emergency ping from the planetary grid. When the Argent Dawn, a passing survey vessel, attempted contact 3 hours later, there was no response. They diverted course. 78 hours later, they arrived in orbit. What they found wasn't war. It wasn't a battlefield. It was absence. Where a city had once glistened beneath a pale blue sky, now there was only scorched rock. The planet's surface had been seared clean, as if someone had taken a blade of energy and carved away its entire northern hemisphere. No buildings, no ships, no bodies, no heat signatures, no radiation, no pulse of civilization. Just a void where life had been. 1 million human souls, erased. The news hit Earth like a thunderclap. In the Hall of Nations, senators shouted over each other. Intelligence agencies launched simultaneous investigations. Conspiracy theorists filled every comm channel with noise. Was it the Varnak, a rogue AI, a cosmic anomaly? But no one knew. And worse, no one claimed responsibility. The United Terran Directorate issued a Level 5 galactic lockdown. Martial law was declared across 3 outer colonies. And in orbit, high above a world now holding its breath, a man named Graves stood at the center of it all. Admiral Jonathan Graves had seen war. He'd led the siege of Europa. He'd burned pirate fleets at the Battle of Kepler Gate. He'd hunted slavers through the asteroid belts of Epsilon Eridani. He was the man presidents called when diplomacy failed, and the only man the Terran High Command trusted when things turned silent and ugly. He didn't make speeches. He didn't ask for permission. He simply walked into the war room on day 4, stared at the footage recovered from Argent Dawn, and said, "Find me who did this, then give me everything." No one argued. It took 8 days. Zorac Dominion. The name came like a whisper from ancient records, an empire that spanned thousands of years, wrapped in ritual and warfare. They had no interest in diplomacy, no ambassadors, no embassies, no trade. Just a long, blood-soaked history of conquest, subjugation, and extermination. They'd never engaged humanity before, never answered hails. They hadn't needed to. To them, humanity was a minor species, a fledgling civilization playing empire. But New Avalon had drifted too close, and the Zorac had answered with fire. On the bridge of the UNS Retribution, Graves stared out into the dark, his face chiseled from stone, his eyes unreadable. Below him, Earth rotated silently, the cradle of humanity, now bracing for war. Behind him, the single largest fleet in human history was forming. 700,000 warships, a tide of vengeance, battle groups from every colony, defense forces, reserve fleets, even private mercenary groups sworn to the Terran Charter. Every ship that could move, fight, or kill was on the list. Dreadnoughts capable of glassing planets. Stealth frigates designed for surgical strikes. Swarms of AI drone carriers, black and silent as the void itself. It was an armada not built for conquest, not for diplomacy, not for survival. It was built to erase. Commander Vasquez stood beside him, her voice low. Scouts confirmed Zorac fleet signatures along the Iridian corridor. They don't seem to be preparing for retaliation or defense. Graves didn't flinch. "They're not expecting anything," he said. She glanced sideways. "Sir, we could send a warning. Ask for terms." Graves turned slowly, handed her a data slate. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what it was. The last image from New Avalon. A child, laughing, running, then turning to look up at the sky. And then white. They already had their chance, Graves said. Now they burn. The next morning, the Terran Directorate issued a full military decree. Operation Judgment initiated. Engage all Zorac assets. No quarter, no retreat, no mercy. As the engines of 700,000 ships roared to life, Graves looked at the stars. Not with awe, not with wonder, but with purpose. Humanity was coming, and this time it wasn't to build. It was to make the galaxy remember. The March of Retribution, space vast and unfeeling, had never seen anything like this. A wall of fire and steel stretched across the void, 700,000 human warships united not by treaties or political will, but by rage. It began with Earth's first armada, 20 dreadnought groups and their escorts. Then came the colonial fleets mobilized from the icy moons of Titan to the scorched domes of Sirius IV. Independent contractors and mercenary packs followed war-hardened crews with vendettas older than nations. Smugglers turned privateers. Pirates signed on under oath and blood. All of them now bore one flag, one goal: vengeance. The formation moved like an unstoppable storm across the stars, accelerating through slipspace in near-perfect synchrony. Behind each battlecruiser were flotillas of frigates and support craft, followed by squadrons of autonomous drones ready to swarm and blind. The UNS Retribution, Graves' flagship, led the charge, its hull black as midnight, its silhouette a dagger aimed at the heart of the Zorac Dominion. Inside the bridge, Admiral Graves stood motionless. He had barely spoken since departure. He didn't need to. The fire in his crew's eyes said everything. The engineers in the lower decks worked in absolute silence. Weapons techs loaded anti-fleet warheads by hand, as if the ritual made it personal. And in the cryo holds, 200,000 Marines slept in armored shells ready to wake only when it was time to kill. Commander Vasquez approached, datapad in hand. Her voice was quiet, reverent. All strike groups in formation. Estimated time to Zorac border, 17 hours. Graves didn't respond at first. His gaze remained fixed on the viewport on the stars ahead. Any movement on their side? Vasquez shook her head. Zorac patrols are scattered. No sign they have registered the full scope of our mobilization. Graves allowed himself a cold breath. They still think we're civilized. The fleet's super AI Thornet processed battle telemetry in real time, adapting and reassigning firepower across millions of variables. Each ship synced into a massive combat lattice, a swarm mind of steel and plasma. Where the Zorac had once fought with brute force, humanity now wielded surgical annihilation. Corvettes zipped ahead, laying out stealth probes and mines in uncharted black space. Planet-killer railguns were primed to fire rounds the size of skyscrapers at relativistic speed. Missile cruisers housed antimatter warheads locked behind 20 layers of failsafe, but the failsafes had just been turned off. As the Retribution passed through the Ganthel drift, the sky itself seemed to shudder under the collective gravitational wake. Civilizations in nearby systems picked up ghost signals, strange whispers of a fleet too large to be natural. A merchant convoy in the Phelan Belt tried to hail them. They received only static. In his private quarters, Graves sat alone. The walls around him were quiet, no chatter, no light, just a single holographic projection. It was a picture, taken from New Avalon. A woman and a child in a garden under a domed sky, laughing, watering alien flowers, completely unaware that death was on its way. Graves didn't blink as he stared. He had no family, no home but the bridge, no reason to feel what others called grief. But he remembered. He remembered what it meant to be prey. The first strike came 12 hours later. The Zorac Outer System Renthari Cluster was a collection of gas giants, refinery rings, and listening posts. Humanity didn't wait for permission. 15 dreadnoughts emerged from subspace. No warnings, no declarations. In 93 seconds, they annihilated the primary defense grid with kinetic lances. Refinery stations vaporized in antimatter blooms. Communications blacked out across the cluster before a single alarm could finish transmitting. One Zorac cruiser tried to escape. It was cut in half mid-jump. When the main fleet arrived, they found nothing left but debris and flickering ion trails. And then they kept going. Zorac Command finally reacted. Too late. Confusion spread through their ranks. Reports were fragmented, contradictory. Enemy fleet size unknown. Confirmed dreadnought count multiple hundreds. No response to hails. They are not negotiating. In the throne chamber of the Zorac Warlord Council, panic set in for the first time in centuries. They had fought dozens of wars, burned hundreds of civilizations, but none of their enemies had ever come with such precision, such silence, such purpose. They had expected resistance, maybe a small retaliatory raid. Instead, they had summoned the apocalypse. On the bridge of the Retribution, a junior officer turned toward Graves. "Sir, incoming Zorac transmission, it's scrambled. Possibly a warning or attempted truce." Graves didn't even turn. "Discard it." "But sir, it could be." "They sent no warning to New Avalon," he said flatly. "Neither will we." Vasquez didn't flinch. "Target acquired. Next system, Solcor Prime, civilian population estimated at 1.3 billion. Graves nodded once. We begin with the orbital defenses, then the military command structures. No surface strikes until we confirm high-value target elimination. And the civilians? He looked at her eyes hard as neutronium. If they get in the way, they chose the wrong empire. As the fleet accelerated, the stars began to blur. A curtain of shadows and fire swept through the heavens. For too long, the galaxy had viewed humanity as a species of diplomats, explorers, scientists. But now they would learn. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was the predator. And the hunt had just begun. Fire and steel upon the Zorac. The Zorac home territories had been untouched for millennia. Their star systems were ringed with fortress worlds, planetary defense grids, and deep space minefields spanning entire sectors. They called themselves eternal. They called themselves unbreakable. They were wrong. The first wave hit the Solcor defense line like a tidal surge made of metal and hatred. Hundreds of human dreadnoughts exited slipspace in perfect silence, followed by carriers and drone barges that unfurled like mechanical wings across the stars. Stealth corvettes laced the field with hunter-killer mines, while gravity warp artillery platforms anchored into position behind asteroid cover. In less than 4 minutes, orbital defense satellites across 3 planets went offline. The Zorac Defense Command barely had time to register the assault before the second wave dropped in. Railgun rounds the size of buses struck fortresses at near light speed, vaporizing bunkers in flashes of blue heat. Swarms of micro-drones, thousands per unit, poured into Zorac formations, slicing hulls open and flooding compartments with white-hot plasma. Everywhere the same message played on loop: no quarter, no mercy, Operation Judgment in effect. From orbit, Solcor Prime was a world of red cliffs and emerald oceans. Great spires of obsidian housed billions. Their capital city, Vrathar, had never fallen. It was considered untouchable, shielded by magnetic barriers, ground-to-orbit rail batteries, and ancient Zorac battle rights. None of that mattered. The UNS Retribution entered geostationary orbit above the city. Graves stood at the forward observation deck, silent as tactical uplinks streamed firing solutions to every ship in the assault column. Primary grid identified, Vasquez reported, targeting capital shields and high command center. Graves didn't speak, he simply nodded once, and hell descended. It began with kinetic lance strikes. Tungsten rods, each weighing 30 tons, fell from orbit at velocities that shattered sound barriers in space. The impact crushed city sectors into craters a kilometer wide. Fires erupted along the coastlines as defense stations exploded in chain reactions. Then came the nukes. Low-yield fusion warheads detonated with surgical precision designed not to glass the planet, but to erase infrastructure. No power, no communication, no cohesion. The Zorac fleet scrambled from their bunkers, but they were already cut off. Human jammers had severed their command nets. Their ships couldn't coordinate. Their fighters launched blind. And humanity moved like a blade. Surface is destabilizing, said the tactical AI. Shielding down to 32%. Recommend ground deployment. Graves gave the order, launch the Marines. Moments later, the sky filled with fire. Tens of thousands of drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, trailing afterburners like comets of death. Each pod housed a Terran Marine clad in assault-grade power armor, black titanium plates, jump packs, exoservo boosters, and HUDs slaved to real-time tactical networks. They didn't land softly. They hit hard, slamming into enemy bunkers, bursting open with magnetic detonators and releasing soldiers trained not to capture, but to cleanse. General Marcus O'Neill led the ground offensive. His voice crackled over open comms as his boots crunched down onto Zorac soil. Alpha Team sector sweep. Delta burn the battery nests. No prisoners. You see a weapon, you shoot it. You see movement, you erase it. The Zorac defenders were brutal, fearless warriors. They fired plasma cannons from barricades, launched sonic bombs into Terran lines, and detonated suicide charges beneath armored walkers. But they were predictable. Human Marines were not. Combat drones flanked from impossible angles. EMP bursts disabled their targeting systems. Snipers invisible under cloaking veils picked off their lieutenants with surgical strikes. Flame troopers swept through tunnels and basements, clearing out resistance nests with white phosphorus. In 4 hours, the capital was breached. By hour 6, the palace fell. Inside the Zorac High Council chamber, Supreme Warlord Zvir stood surrounded by rubble and dying guards. His scales were cracked, his breathing labored. Behind him, a cracked window gave him full view of Vrathar burning. He had underestimated them. He had assumed humanity was just another pest species, loud, arrogant, but fragile. He had thought them incapable of true wrath. But now, as the UNS Retribution loomed overhead, as orbital bombardments cracked tectonic plates, he understood. The humans weren't conquerors. They were executioners. A transmission came through. A human face appeared illuminated in red light. Admiral Graves. His expression was unreadable. "This is what happens," he said coldly, "when you erase our people." Zvir swallowed his pride. His voice rasped. "We surrender." Graves stared, then said two words. "Too late." The transmission cut. Seconds later, the sky split open as the final orbital salvo began. From orbit, Sokor Prime's capital crumbled into smoke. Mountain ranges collapsed into magma chasms. The seas boiled. Great sky fortresses fell screaming into the oceans. And then silence. On the bridge of the Retribution, Vasquez whispered Zorac command. Neutralized. Graves didn't answer. He simply turned to the holographic map. Another system, another target, another red mark. Behind him, crew members stared silently at the inferno below. Humanity had made its point. The Terran Dominion, the oldest empire in the quadrant, had lost its first world. And they would lose many more. Because this war wasn't for territory. It was for remembrance. And humanity remembered everything. The galaxy reacts birth of the Accord. The galaxy was watching. And for the first time in living memory, it was afraid. News of the fall of Sokor Prime spread like plasma fire through the trade routes and comm relays. The Zorac Dominion, once feared, once eternal, had lost a core world in less than a week. Not in a war, not through negotiation, but through obliteration. Hundreds of species who had lived in terror of the Zorac for generations didn't celebrate. They went silent because something worse had risen from the ashes. Humanity. In the council chambers of Varnock, the Terralay ambassador, an ancient being of thought and silk, spoke with a tremble in its many voices. They did not invade, they erased. Entire cities gone before planetary scans could even finish rendering. Our probes picked up gravitational fractures from the bombardments. A voice growled from across the hall. Warlord Jakul of the Gari smashed his clawed fist against the conference table, splintering the wood. This is what I warned you. We let the humans expand unchecked. We let them build their fleets, their machines. Now look what they've become. The Zorac brought it on themselves, hissed, a Solari noble. They struck first. And the humans answered like gods of death, Jakul spat. They didn't just retaliate. They demolished an empire. What do you think they'll do when someone else crosses them? The chamber fell into grim silence. They all knew. From that silence, a pact was born. The Accord of Sovereign Worlds. 5 powers. 5 species who had warred against one another for centuries. Now united under one cause, contain humanity. In a secluded war room aboard the UNS Retribution, the briefing holograms flickered to life. Intelligence reports streamed in from across neutral space. Unusual fleet movements. Closed-door meetings between bitter alien rivals. Coordinated signal encryption updates. Commander Vasquez stood at the central console, face pale. It's confirmed, she said. The Gari Solari Kavir Zethan in Trolari. They've signed a multi-system military treaty. They're calling it the Accord. Graves didn't speak. They're reinforcing their borders, mass-producing warships, establishing joint military command. Our analysts project, she hesitated, they're preparing to isolate and blockade all Terran-aligned systems. Graves's voice was quiet like the eye of a storm. They think they can cage us. Sir Vasquez said, carefully, they outnumber us. 5 empires worth of ships. If they move fast, we could be boxed in, cut off from the colonies. He turned toward her. No hesitation. Then we strike first. The War Council flinched. Admiral Marcus O'Neill, scarred, armored, and ever blunt, leaned forward. About damn time. Vasquez frowned. We don't even know where they'll move first. Graves tapped the holomap, zooming into the Solari systems. They'll try diplomacy first. A warning. A demand to disarm. They'll think we'll hesitate. He turned steel in his voice. We won't. 3 days later, the galaxy learned what preemption looked like. At 0300 Standard, the UNS Eternity, humanity's second super dreadnought, exited hyperspace into Solari space with 2 fleets behind her. No broadcast, no warning, no flag of truce. She was followed by the 2nd and 9th Expeditionary Forces. The Solari defense fleet scrambled, but they were too late. Drones wished swarm control stations before the alarms finished sounding. Orbital defense rings were severed by targeted railgun strikes. A Solari carrier exploded into fragments before it had even launched its first fighter squadron. The humans didn't engage in formation. They moved like a storm, fragmented, unpredictable, overwhelming. By the time the Solari Command Center tried to send out a distress call, their satellite network was already gone. And above it all, Admiral Graves' voice rang clear through every intercepted channel. You formed an alliance to contain us. You should have formed one to beg us. On Varnock, the Accord leaders watched the carnage unfold via secure holofeeds. Static and screams, tactical readouts bleeding red. They've already taken 3 systems, the Solari diplomat whispered, in one day. The Kavir warlord cursed. This is not containment. This is genocide. They know we're united, the Trelai ambassador said slowly. And still they struck first. No Jakul growled. They struck smart. A hologram projected the human fleets in motion, arcs of steel and fury carving their way deeper into Accord space. They didn't wait to be caged. They broke the lock before it closed. Back on the Eternity Graves stood atop the command dais, the glow of 1,000 tactical displays washing over him. Sir Vasquez reported Solari sector is collapsing. Local defense has routed. Civilians are evacuating en masse. Accord is mobilizing. Graves narrowed his eyes on the star map. Good, he said. O'Neill smirked beside him. They wanted a fight. Now they've got one. Graves nodded. We don't stop. Not until they realize this galaxy doesn't belong to empires anymore. It belongs to the ones strong enough to take it. And in the silence that followed, the order went out. Prepare the next strike. The galaxy had drawn a line. Humanity erased it with fire. The Battle of Earth, 20,000 ships, 0 survivors. They came to end humanity. 20,000 ships, 5 species, 5 empires, 5 armies unified by one purpose: break the Terran war machine, destroy Earth, and burn the memory of humanity from the stars. They called it the final operation. But they forgot one thing. Earth was not a home. It was a fortress. High above the blue marble in orbit over Luna, Admiral Jonathan Graves stood on the bridge of the UNS Eternity, the most advanced warship ever built by human hands. Behind him, 700,000 warships hung in formation, an iron shell around Sol. Every colony had answered the call. Every Terran fleet had returned. Every civilian ship that could be retrofitted with guns had joined the line. The sky above Earth was no longer black. It was bristling. Contact, Vasquez said. Her voice was tight-focused. A sea of red markers flooded the holographic map, enemy ships exiting hyperspace on the edge of the system. 10, 20, 100, then thousands. Heavy dreadnoughts, carrier leviathans, interceptor swarms, plasma frigates in tight V formation. At the center of it all, the Accord flagship, a battle station the size of a small moon armed with starbreaker weapons. O'Neill let out a low whistle. They brought the whole damn galaxy. Graves didn't flinch. Good. On the Accord command deck, High Marshal Threx of the Kavir watched Earth grow larger in his view screen. His claws twitched. This is where they break, he muttered. One final push, and humanity is erased. Then his sensor officer paled. Sir, updated scan. There are more ships. Many more. How many? The officer gulped. 700,000. Silence. Then that's not possible. But it was. The first human salvo came without warning. No signal, no threat, no posturing. Just fire. Railgun rounds moving at near-light speed tore through Accord vanguard lines before the enemy could even complete deployment. Plasma beams scythed down battleships in perfect arcs. Swarms of AI-controlled interceptors spiraled through the void, weaving impossible patterns, tearing fighter squadrons to ribbons. The Accord's left flank evaporated in the first 30 seconds. From the surface of Earth, civilians watched the sky ignite. Streaks of white and red danced overhead like furious comets. Children pointed. Veterans saluted. The world did not fear, because it knew they were ready. Enemy fleets pushing toward Mars orbit, Vasquez reported. They're trying to split our formation. Graves nodded. Collapse the pincer. Deploy the 5th and 10th Armadas. Don't hold the line, shatter it. Across the comms, human commanders echoed the order. From Saturn to Venus, human fleets surged forward. Coordinated by hive mind battle AIs, they moved like muscle memory. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Each shot counted. Each kill was personal. On the Accord flagship, chaos reigned. High Marshal Threx screamed into his comms. They're everywhere, every flank, every vector. His tactical officer yelled, we outnumber them in sectors 4 through 6. We did. A kinetic round slammed through the side of the command deck, carving a burning line through steel, flesh, and bone. The flagship cracked apart. And in that moment, the Accord realized they hadn't brought enough. From the Eternity Graves watched the battle unfold. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He simply raised a hand. Engage final sequence. On the outer rim of the system, a second human fleet uncloaked the ghost line. ships running cold, silent, and unseen. They emerged behind the Accord's rear line and struck. From both sides, the Terran war machine closed in like a pair of jaws snapping shut. The Accord fleet didn't just lose, it ceased to exist. 12 hours later, the void over Sol was silent again. Debris drifted where once had been pride and power. Of the Accord's 20,000 warships, none survived. Not one. On Earth, cities erupted in cheers, parades flooded the streets, statues were unveiled. Children were named after ships that fell. Across the colonies, fireworks lit up alien skies. But on the Eternity, there was no celebration. Only Graves, staring at the fading red dots on the holo map. Because he knew this wasn't victory. This was a beginning. Casualty report, he asked. Vasquez answered without emotion. Light. Less than 0.03% fleet damage. Civilian losses 0. And the Accord, she hesitated. Their chain of command is gone. The rest are running. O'Neill's voice crackled over the comms. So what now, Admiral? Graves didn't look away from the stars. We finish it because humanity hadn't fought this war to survive. They had fought it to end the ones who started it. And now it was time to go hunting. The reckoning begins. Zos, Vajir, Dracos. They came for Earth, so now Earth was coming for them. The orders were clear. Zos, Vajir, Dracos, no diplomacy, no surrender, no survivors. They were the heart of the Accord, the capitals, the pride of 3 ancient species. They were also now targets. First, Zos 4, the jewel of the Gari Confederation. A marvel of technology and order. Artificial rings circled its equator housing orbital shipyards, AI farms, and the bulk of Gari industry. Its surface cities shimmered with glass and chrome efficient, proud unbending. They thought their planetary shields would hold. They were wrong. From the bridge of the UNS Eternity Graves stood as 50,000 Terran warships formed a death halo around Zos. Begin bombardment, he ordered. The sky ignited. Dreadnoughts unleashed tungsten rods from orbit, each strike hitting with the force of a localized nuclear event. Plasma lances carved through defense platforms. Missile storms darkened the upper atmosphere, slamming into shield generators until the entire planetary grid collapsed. Below Gari, civilians screamed, and then the Marines dropped. General O'Neill led the charge boots first into the heart of the Gari capital. Skyscrapers burned, streets cracked, mechs marched forward under fire. Terran soldiers moving in squads of 4 swept through districts like death incarnate. The Gari military fought back. Shock troops, anti-air batteries, armored hover columns. But they were disorganized, fragmented, overwhelmed by speed and tech they hadn't anticipated. Snipers took out officers before they could issue orders. Drones fried their comms. EMP strikes paralyzed their mechs. And then the command center fell. O'Neill stood amid the ruins. Capital secured, he reported, wiping blood from his visor. Executions complete. Graves gave no reply. He was already looking at the next target, Vajir, the Solari homeworld. A planet of peace and beauty, floating citadels, bioluminescent forests, twin moons. They believed in art, diplomacy, enlightenment. They were the ones who whispered first, urging the Accord to strike. They thought their culture would shield them. Graves thought otherwise. The Terran fleet entered orbit silently. They didn't fire immediately. Instead, they broadcast footage, New Avalon, Solcor Prime, the Battle of Earth. And then Graves' voice, "You wanted war, now choke on it." The orbital strike began in perfect rhythm. Shield grids buckled. Floating palaces fell like wounded birds crashing into forest canopies with sonic booms. Solari cities melted into oceans of fire. And then the Marines came. The Solari were scholars, not soldiers. They tried to surrender. They tried to beg. But O'Neill had orders. His team stormed the Grand Palace, breached its crystalline gates, and dragged the ruling council into the throne hall. The Solari matriarch trembled. "Please, we surrender." O'Neill tilted his head. "No," he said, and pulled the trigger. By nightfall, Vajir was a cinder. Forests burned. Oceans boiled. Civilization erased. Graves didn't blink. He marked the last target. Dracos, the Kavir homeworld. Not beauty, not industry. War. A planet forged in conflict where warrior clans trained in eternal bloodshed. Fortresses carved into mountains. Sky-hung artillery platforms. A planetary defense grid more complex than any in the galaxy. If any world would resist, it was this one. Graves didn't care. He brought 100,000 ships. The Kavir fleets didn't run. They charged, and they fought. For the first time in the war, the humans didn't sweep instantly. Kavir dreadnoughts held formation under orbital fire. They launched gravity bombs, fighter squadrons, planetary flak fields. Human ships burned. But they adapted. They always did. Thornet, the fleet AI, adjusted tactics every 30 seconds. Human commanders rotated flanks mid-battle. Drone waves flooded gaps. Sniper frigates targeted bridge decks. Railguns cracked Kavir hulls like bones. It took 3 days, and then the sky over Dracos turned black with smoke. The surface invasion was worse. Every street was a battlefield. Every building a fortress. Kavir warriors refused to die quietly. But the Terran Marines were relentless. They advanced meter by meter. Grenades, fire, mechs, flamethrowers, tank-on-tank duels. No mercy. O'Neill personally led the final assault on the Kavir warlord's citadel. He fought hand-to-hand through hallways soaked in blood, killing with blade and fist when ammo ran out. When he finally reached the throne room, the Kavir general knelt, not in surrender, in defiance. "You kill us," he growled, "but we will be remembered." O'Neill put a bullet between his eyes. "No," he said, "you'll be forgotten." Dracos burned. Its moons shattered from a kinetic barrage. The cities flattened. The rivers turned red. Smoke curled into the clouds and never stopped rising. The accord was broken. The galaxy was silent again. And humanity had avenged. But it wasn't over. Not yet, because Graves knew somewhere out there someone was watching and planning. And when they moved, so would Earth. The last fortress falls. The accord was dead, but like all dying things, it still twitched. In a remote system beyond the Crimson Expanse, the surviving members of the Accord gathered in secret inside the hollowed core of an ancient asteroid known as the Bastion. It was their final fortress, a bunker of desperation. Warlord Chaco of the Gari stood over a war table littered with red hollows. His armor was scorched. One of his eyes burned cybernetic red. "We cannot let them continue," he snarled. "The Terrans will not stop. They will burn every world that does not kneel." Across from him, Solari advisor Miva's voice trembled. "We tried to contain them. We tried diplomacy. And now look where we are." Kavir General Thorax slammed a fist down. "Then we strike at their fleets, at their supply lines, at anything that bleeds." It wasn't a strategy. It was a tantrum, but it was all they had left. Graves knew. He always knew. Thornet intercepted fragmented transmissions, war council chatter, evacuation logs, scrambled troop movements. The Accord was not regrouping. They were running. And that Graves understood best of all. Predators could smell prey when it bled. The UNS Eternity emerged from slip space in the Drosari Vale, flanked by 80,000 warships. No more alliances, no more politics, just the final task. Erase the last light, end the last whisper, make it absolute. The Bastion's defenses were ancient but formidable. Dozens of asteroid-mounted cannons fired slugs the size of shuttles. Shield harmonics bent space itself to deflect missiles. Drones lined every access corridor. But it was too little, too late. Human railguns sliced through stone like butter. EMP waves shorted out defensive grids. Orbital precision strikes cracked the Bastion's outer shell. In 2 hours, the fortress was bleeding vacuum. Inside the War Council chamber, chaos ruled. Miva shouted, "We must surrender, contact them. Offer terms, offer everything." Jackal drew a blade. "You would beg from the species that turns us into ash. There are civilians still alive, children. There were children on New Avalon too." And in that moment, no one argued, because they all remembered. Down below in the hangar levels, Terran Marines breached the perimeter. They moved like ghost armor, black as obsidian HUDs pulsing with red kill zones. Drones buzzed ahead, scanning for thermal signatures. Silence followed them like a second skin. When they found resistance, it didn't last long. Flash grenades, pulse rifles, melee blades with monomolecular edges, blood-soaked steel. General O'Neill led the final push into the command core. He stepped over bodies, some warriors, some too young to be. He didn't flinch. He didn't pause. He opened the last vault door with a magnetic override, breaching the final layer of the Accord's leadership. The survivors stared at him, broken, shaking. One of them whispered, "We surrender." O'Neill activated his comms. "Admiral, they're begging." Graves's voice came cold across the channel. "Then they finally understand." A beat. "Then, kill them?" O'Neill obliged. Outside, the Bastion cracked in half. Fusion cores detonated. A final shockwave rippled through the void, scattering debris across the Drosari Vale like the bones of a rotting god. And with it, the Accord, the last remnant, ceased to be. On the bridge of the Eternity, Vasquez stood beside Graves, eyes fixed on the slowly vanishing wreckage. "It's done," she said softly. He didn't respond. She glanced sideways. "You think there'll be another?" He nodded. "There's always another." Across the stars, the message had been received. Humanity was no longer prey. They had become the reapers. Humanity Ascendant, never again the prey. 6 months after the fall of the Accord, the galaxy had gone quiet. Not out of peace, out of fear. Every major hyperlane into Terran space was now guarded by fortified outposts bristling with railguns and orbital mines. The few trade vessels that dared to approach were scanned, tagged, and often turned around without a word. Treaties poured in, not alliances, pleas, neutrality agreements, apologies, even reparations. Entire planetary councils groveled for forgiveness for not stopping the Accord. And Earth did not respond. Earth remembered. Admiral Jonathan Graves stood on the bridge of the UNS Eternity, now orbiting the outer rim world of Carthus Prime, a recently acquired Accord territory turned Terran base. Below him, orbital construction platforms moved in synchronized patterns, building new fleet yards, troop deployment zones, and deep space radar webs. The Terran Dominion was no longer an idea. It was becoming reality. Vasquez entered datapad in hand. New fleet deployments confirmed. The 8th Armada is establishing presence in the Kavari corridor. 9th is sweeping the southern spiral, and recruitment has surged across every colony. Graves nodded once. The war hardened us, she continued, but it also unified us. She paused. At what cost? He said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Across the galaxy, civilizations whispered in secret. The humans are coming. Don't cross them. Don't even look at their borders. Others began preparing just in case. Fleets expanded. Weapons researched. Covert programs launched in shadows. Because they all knew the truth. Humanity had burned an empire to ash in a matter of months. And they had not even mobilized at full strength. In the Terran Senate on Earth, a new doctrine passed with near unanimous vote. The Dominion Protocol, no preemptive disarmament, no trust without verification, no mercy if attacked. For the first time, humanity openly declared its dominance doctrine to the stars. We do not seek war, but if war seeks us, we end it. O'Neill stood in the Citadel on Mars overlooking the training fields where thousands of new Marines drilled in coordinated formation. They were younger, sharper, angrier. He turned to the assembled officers. The next war won't take us by surprise, he said. Next time we won't react. We'll initiate. In deep space, a Terran scout vessel intercepted encrypted communications between minor powers, gathering under a new name, the Pale Concord. The goal was clear: create a counterweight to the Terran Dominion before it became absolute. The Terran response: fleet construction accelerated by 30%. Back aboard the Eternity, Graves read the report in silence. Then he looked up at the galactic map. Dots of light, dots of red, dots of movement. Old alliances fraying, new shadows forming. He turned to Vasquez. How long before they try again? Years, she replied. Maybe decades, but they will. Good. He turned to the comm officer. Send the signal. Deploy the scouts. Expand the frontier. If they want to test us again, they'll find the stars already belong to us. Below, the engines of new ships roared to life, the sky filled with Terran banners. The blackness of space was no longer cold and indifferent. It was occupied by steel, by fire, by memory, by humanity. The war was over. But the Dominion had just begun, to be continued.